Hello, this is Ricardo from Spectrum Center, and in today's session, we'll be talking about how to customize, how to create your own color palette, or even modify the values inside of your color palette when looking at a coverage inside of the map. So in this case, I'm using a network, just an example network around Lake Tahoe, and I already have my prediction generated. So let's go ahead and get started. So before we do start on modifying our color palette, let's talk about what we're seeing in the map. So right now, nothing below negative 89 dBm is being colored in the map. And we can also verify this with the crosshairs that's in the center of the map view. We can drag that into an area where currently is not being colored. So let's even zoom in and we get to pick an area. So let's say right here. So we can say at the bottom, we can see actually that where the crosshair is located, we can see the coordinates in degree minutes seconds, the elevation above sea level. And in this case, we can see that point in particular is being calculated at negative 105.7 dBm. So that reason it's currently not being colored. Now, how can we modify so we can see different colors or even have more area being colored? Before we do that, before we modify our color palette, a couple things to keep in mind. Uh, the first one is going to be at the bottom left corner of the map preview. And I'm just going to take a screenshot just so that I can better illustrate this. So we have here the name of our prediction. Now, it doesn't matter what name you give it to your prediction. The main thing is of interest and the main thing to keep in mind is going to be the last three characters. So when you give a name to your prediction, when you're creating a prediction, the software is going to always add four characters, an underscore and three letters. Those three letters are going to be the most important part right now for your color palette. So your color palette and your prediction have to match each other in terms of type. So in this case, my prediction is dBm. So my color palette has to be dBm. Otherwise, the two don't match. Basically, different units, they don't go together. So with that, let's go ahead and press on the color palette, and that will take us to where we can modify or even create our own color palette. So we currently have the default color palette, which is named Spectrum. So for this one, it basically is going from minimum value to maximum value. So what we saw from the map page. So in here we have the different types. So this is what I meant. What is our prediction type? So in this case, it's a DBM. So the row that will right now affect our prediction is going to be the DBM row. So in this case, let's say we modify the minimum. So let's put negative 10, let's say negative 107. And we can modify the maximum threshold as well. For right now, I'm just going to leave it as what I currently have, negative 21. And I'm going to press update. So once we press update, it's going to save those values and it's going to apply those values. So now it's going to be a little bit hard to see the blue crosshairs with the blue from the color palette of our coverage. But we can see that area is now being colored because it now does fall within the our minimum threshold, our minimum value to be colored, which is negative 107. And that value, as we saw earlier, it is negative 105.7. So with that, basically lowering your values for the coverage means that your coverage is going to look bigger. So let's go ahead and go back to the color palette. Now let's say we want to create our own color palette, and we can do that. So from the top, select palette. It's a drop-down menu, and from here, we just press create new palette. So it's going to go ahead and press on that one, and then it gives us three fields where we define our brand new color palette. So the first one, palette name. What name would you like to give to your color palette? You can give it any name you want. Keep in mind, you can reuse color palettes throughout the different projects inside of your account of SpectrumE. So personally, what I like to do is give it a number of how many colors I'm using on this color palette. And then I like to also write down what type of color palette I'm creating, whether it's DBM, DBU, and so forth. The second row is going to be the type, and this is where your color palette has to match your prediction. Otherwise, if you create a, let's say, DBU color palette, it's not going to be compatible with a DBM prediction. So again, last three letters of your color palette, the name that the software gave it, in this case, DBM. However, before we do select DBM, just want to show you the drop-down menu. So we have multiple options: DBM, DBU, DBR, power flux density, among others, percentage, um, and that means that there's multiple different types of functions that can generate different types of predictions. And basically, for the most part, it is units. So like I mentioned, dBm, dBu, um, percentage. So keep that in mind whenever you go through this drop-down menu. So in this case, that is fine. And then number of entries. Number of entries, basically what it means is how many colors would you like? You could create a one color palette. If you would like, you could put 50 colors, however many you would like. So in this case, I'm just gonna put three for this, just as an example, a good amount of colors to do as an example. And then I'm going to create this one. It's going to press create. Once we create it, you will see your color palette, whatever name you gave it. You can see here the type. So DBM color palette type. That is perfect for my DBM prediction. It is set as the default, so that's perfect right now. And then we just have to define the values. So the colors, to modify your colors, just press here on the little color box and you can modify however you would like. So let's say I'm just going to pick it just like a street traffic light. So red, yellow, green. So just customize it however you would like for your specific project. The next one is the value. So before we define the values, what does it mean? This is going to be the values you want for your coverage. What is the unit? Well, that's going to be defined by your type of prediction or color palette, because both of them have to match anyway. So either one. It can be percentage, it can be dBu values. In this case, it's dBm. Now, the next thing to keep in mind is here the software is putting 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. That actually is going to show you that the values have to go from the lowest value to the highest value. So keep that in mind. So let's say negative 105, and then let's put negative 85, and lastly, but not least, let's say negative 40. So I'm increasing the values as I'm going down the rows, or basically down the list of colors. The label is basically what label would you like for the color palette to display. So you can give it any label you want. So for example, in projects where I'm presenting for two engineers, I will put the values. So I'll say negative 105 dBm, for example. If I'm presenting this to someone who doesn't have engineering background knowledge, I might just write weak, strong, or medium signal. Um, And in some projects, you might have to name the technology, and usually that's going to be a one color, but you can also put your label as whatever technology you're trying to simulate. Once we have everything defined, we press update, and we'll see that in the map being displayed. So we can see the red, the yellow, and the green. Going through the predictions page, so when we created the color palette, again, just keep in mind the last three characters from your predictions page. You can see the type of prediction that you have. So dBm, dBu, more dBm, dBu, RGB, among others, DOT as an example. So keep that in mind whenever you create a color palette or whenever you want to customize a color palette. Back in the map, let's say my project changed and I need to modify the parameters. You can do so. You can just press on the color palette and modify your parameters. So let's say um, potentially you need it to be negative 55 for the green color. That's fine. Just modify the value, modify the label if needed, press update, and you'll see those modifications taken into effect right away. And with my label, I can't exactly say it, but if we looked at the values, we can know exactly where the prediction changes colors. So in red is going to be anything that is equal to negative 105 or greater, all the way to negative 85, where negative 85 is going to be yellow, and anything greater is going to stay yellow up to negative 55. Anything equal or greater than negative 55 is going to be represented in green color for this color palette. If we want to change color palettes to, let's say, a different color palette, create a new color palette, we can do so. We can just go back in the color palette page and recreate, modify. Well, we already modified it. So let's say we want a different color palette. So from the um, select palette menu, let's select again the default, which was the spectrum. So I'm going to select that one. And then here, just make sure you select it as the default. So set it as default. So there we go, checked marked. Modify the, in this case, the DBM row if needed. Press update and you'll get your different color palette to be active inside of Spectrum E. And that concludes today's session. If you guys have any questions, just let our team know so we can assist you.